Okay, here it goes. This all started with my father's 70th birthday. I think there's periods in our lives where we recollect, reflect on did we serve our purpose? You know, a lot of things. Anyway, on that 70th birthday, he decided that our family has always, through the generations, been into ranching. It's in our blood, and there's just something about digging into that earth, that soil, regenerates us. There's a peace that comes with it too. It's like when you stand in the middle of a field and the grass has grown and it's like an ocean and it's quiet and you listen to the birds. Sometimes ranchers, or people think ranchers just take from the earth. Not my family. It's what I wanted to share. We want people to get to know us. The American rancher is dying out. And I want to see my father's legacy live out and his father's. So I've chosen to share some of our personal family information so that you can get to know us and know who we say we are, and know that your beef, it's not just about the beef, it's in the environment as well. On that note, this is my father, Brad, and we'll refer to him as Grandpa Brad. Next to him on the other horse is his father, Grandpa Hogan. We call him Grandpa Hogan, and that's my grandpa. So my dad, my grandpa, this is also my Grandpa Hogan. My dad, right here on the horse with my oldest brother, Jared. And this is Grandpa George Reed. So Grandpa Hogan's grandpa. And he was one of Utah's first environmentalists for Utah, for ranchers and farmers. And I'm going to start there. I'm reading the memoirs of J. Reed Hogan, and that's my Grandpa Hogan. And there's so much in this that I wish I could share, but we'll just start with these bits and pieces that have to do with the environment and ranching and maybe some of the big histories like World War II. So this is my Grandpa Hogan and when he talks about his grandfather, that's George Reed. They were born in Salt Lake City. So my grandpa originally was a city boy, but his Grandpa Reed lived in the city but also had a ranch out in, I think it's like the Pleasant View area of Utah. Anyway, so I'll start here. My grandfather retired at the age of 33. So that's George Reed retired at age 33. So I never knew him working at a paying job. He made his money by defending the farmers in the first pollution case in Utah called the Smoke Abatement Case at Kennecott Copper Mine. He won the trial and must have made enough money not to have to go to work anymore. The places he invested his money were ZCMI, Utah Idaho Sugar, and Union Pacific Railroad. The little stock I have in ZCMI was handed down to my mother and then to me. He was always a busy man, giving his time for no pay until he died at the age of 86. He was chairman of the Salt Lake Valley Old Folks with their annual gathering in Liberty Park. Now, this is going to be my Grandpa Hogan reflecting on his childhood and his first experiences that he recalls with horses. Starting at 13 years of age, I was invited to go with the McCullough family and stay part of the summer at Brighton in Big Cottonwood Canyon. These were great times. I would hike and fish and soon got friendly with the Green family that rented the horses to people to ride. This was my first exposure to horses, and I learned to ride well. Bob and I would get up at daylight and go bring in the horses. I've loved horses ever since. We would play pranks around the corrals with the customers, and there were always plenty of people hanging around. And this is him, Grandpa Hogan, at age 13, I'm guessing. And talks about the Depression, end of World War I, but we're gonna skip that and move to some of these other parts. This is when he met my Grandma Hogan, who he married, and she was a farm girl and he was a city boy. Because as he said, he was first had his exposure to horses when he was 13. And he grew up kitty corner from the temple in Salt Lake City. The trip to Idaho was very interesting to me, as I had never been there before. I had heard of Preston, Idaho, and only knew it to be a wild town where one could get married and divorced very quickly. Phil and Valois went with us, and when we arrived in Preston, the dance hall was called the Persinia. It was full in swing. We stopped to dance and soon found out that we four were the center of attraction, being dressed really nice and our style of dancing. Everyone soon left the dance hall to watch a couple of fellows fight in the back alley. We thought we would get our chance, but no one challenged us. After dancing for a while, we went on our way to Cleveland. The road north of Preston was gravel. It seemed to us that their ranch was pretty far out. When we arrived, it was after midnight. After meeting Devon's folks, we were assigned to our rooms to sleep. Early the next morning, about 4:30 a.m., we could hear the family stirring around. It was then that I realized how early country people awakened and started their work. And let's see. So, got his first taste of country life. Oh, here's about the time my grandparents met Grandpa Hogan, Grandma Hogan, Devon, who he speaks of. And she was the farm girl and he was the city boy. She was from Grace, Idaho, and he was from Salt Lake City, Utah. So like I said, we skip a lot of interesting parts in history, but this one I'll read. The war was getting worse in the Pacific. This is World War II, obviously. The war was getting worse in the Pacific, and the conflict in Europe with Hitler was grinding on. Most all the young men from 19 to 30 had left for the war. I had wanted to get involved for some time, but kept the feeling to myself because of my obligations. But soon I told Devon that I was going to enlist. She did not resist, but I am sure that she did not want me to go. I also felt the time would come that I would be drafted, even though I was deferred for two reasons. First, because I was married, and second, because my job at the mine was considered a priority for the war effort. When I enlisted, Devon was between 7 and 8 months pregnant. The day came all too soon for me to leave. I had quit my job, and it was agreed that Devon would stay with Donna and Claire, my sister and brother-in-law until after the baby was born. I was to travel to California, where I would take my training at Alameda near San Francisco. All my family was at the train station and some of Devon's. There was a lot of tears and a lot of love. I was starting off on an adventure that would be the first of many adventures in my lifetime. One that I did not relish to do, but felt an obligation and duty to perform. At that time, I did not know my life would be filled with many times of uncertainty of what would be ahead. I cannot say any of these experiences then or now I faced without fear. There was always a certain apprehension and fear. Even though I think Devon and my family thought there was no fear in me and that I could face any situation, there are many things that I have done in my life, but only I have known my own feelings. I quickly got involved with my duties as a sailor and soon developed a reputation as a leader and a man with self-confidence. I made friends fast and soon felt the confidence that other men had in me. No matter what we did in training, no man could do it better than I. Whether it was physical like hand-to-hand combat training or learning all the requirements such as signaling, Morse code, and weaponry. One day I received the surprise of my life. It was only 4 days after I had arrived. I received a cablegram that my first child was born and that it was a boy. I had already told Devon when she was first pregnant that if it was a boy, he was to be named Patrick Reed. Oh, I was so happy, but I had not expected the baby so soon. This is still while he is serving, but in California. One day, Lewis and I heard that they were to start a horse patrol on the beaches of the West Coast. So we investigated and volunteered to join up. We convinced the Navy that we knew all about horses and were assigned an area from Point Reyes, which was 30 miles north of San Francisco, to Madeira Point, which was 40 miles south of San Francisco. Our new commander was to be a retired cavalry officer from World War I, about 70 years old, that they had called back to active duty and gave him a Navy commission. When I met him, I knew he needed our help greatly, so I do admit I took advantage of the situation. At least he was honest. I had already written to Devon to let her know that she and Patrick could come live close to where I would be stationed. The day I was to meet Devon, the commander and I were in the Jeep going to south of San Francisco. We were scouting the area for horse patrol and the rock section of the beach only suited for dog patrol. The commander was still instructing me to go south until it got to the point that I knew I would miss Devon if I did not turn around. After deciding that he had no concern, I made a U-turn in the road and headed back. He then asked me why I was disobeying orders. I said, any commander that did not have any more respect for his men than he was exhibiting should not have a command. He said nothing until I dropped him off at the castle. It says castle in quotation marks. It was then that he apologized to me. After that experience, we got along great, and for the next year and a half, I received anything that I asked for. One humorous event was when we received our shipment of horses from the cavalry in Montana. They delivered them to the stockyards of San Francisco. There were 120 wild horses right off the range. The breed was a cross between a Morgan and Percheron, except for 4 that were thoroughbred for we officers. I wanted to rent trucks to haul them to our stables that we had rented on Skyline Boulevard, but the commander insisted that we wrangle them from the stockyards to the stables. I told him it was impossible, but I believe he wanted the publicity of the event. I selected Almane Boulevard. I'm sorry if I'm slaughtering these names, because it was a straight street with business houses a long ways before we'd reach the residential area. Everything went fine until we reached the residential section. Then, with only Lewis and I to haze them, they soon broke away and scattered all over that part of the city. We got the publicity the commander wanted, but not the humor he liked published in the news. We were over a week gathering up the horses. I must state the reason for our patrol of the beaches was that the war with Japan was just starting, and the United States was at that time fearful of any invasion from the West Coast. We soon had our dogs arrive, and with them a special trained man to train them for the work. One kind to do patrol work, another kind to be trained for attack dogs. In all, we had about 40 dogs. I forgot to write that when we first received the horses, Lewis and I had the responsibility to break them all for riding. All our tack was army, McKellen saddles, and double snaffle bits. We thought we had all the horses broke until one day Lois and I rode our horses to the beach. We soon learned that it took just as much time to get them used to the surf on the beach as it was to break them in the first place. Ships were at that time being sunk as they left the Golden Gate Bridge. The cargo would sometimes wash up on the beach. Both the Germans and the Japanese subs were very active in the area. We had 3 occasions that Japanese made landings in small boats, but they were picked up by my men on patrol. On one occasion, we had to set our attack dogs loose to get them. The dogs killed one of the men, but 2 others were captured. And that ends the first part of how our family was involved with the environmental movement of mining that was ruining their crops from smeltering, poisoning their waters, which they were watering their crops with. And like I said, my great grandpa George, great grandpa George Reed led that lawsuit against Kennecott Copper Mine. It was called something else back then. And then we just learned about his grandson, which is my grandpa Hogan's first experiences with horses and marrying a girl from the country, and how his love is beginning for ranching. And that will be our next segment from his memoirs. thank you for listening. And I hope that you support American ranchers because we're dwindling. And you would be surprised that we are, I believe we just recently were passed up. We were the #1 exporter of beef in the world. I think now, just for 2023, we actually are second. Now don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that was the latest study that's come out for the beef industry. But we are the second largest importer of beef. And what people don't know is that the beef they're getting in grocery stores is most of that beef that's imported from other countries. And it is marked, inspected by the USDA or Product of America, which just this year they're finalizing that it can no longer be marked as a product of America if it's not from our soil here, because that has been an issue and isn't fair for the ranchers here, that it costs us a lot more to raise our animals here. The land here is more expensive. It's common sense compared to Uruguay or parts of Australia, where they have all year for grass season. Here we have to grow our own grass for the winter. That's at least what our family ranch chooses to do, so that we know what's on our crops. We know what's going into our cattle that we later eat. Not chemicals, not pesticides, not antibiotics. And it's expensive to raise cattle in the U.S. But what I am trying to stress to people is, because my father believes everyone should be able to feed their family at a fair price, that for his category of beef, 100% grass-fed, and the price he's asking is the same price you pay for non-grass-fed in the grocery store that you don't know where it's coming from. And he is trying to keep his prices fair. And yes, we have to do a cost evaluation every few months, and sometimes in the beginning of this, we've had to raise our prices already because it wouldn't sustain the ranch. We would lose the ranch. And so we've had to raise them, but instead of raising it so much like we were advised to do, he still raised it, but not as high as we were advised to, because he wanted to do another evaluation in a couple of months because maybe costs will come down. And that's what I love about my father, is he is benefit of the doubt. He's positive. In the beginning with business, as a young man, he thought more with his brain than his heart, but he's always used his heart. And then I think brain and heart, and now it's more with his heart. And I support him in that, and I love it about him. Maybe some of my other family members disagree. We have a close relative that sells their grass-fed beef for a minimum of $18 a pound hang weight. And right now, he just rose it to $5.25 a pound for his 100% grass-fed. I want people to know the kind of man they're dealing with. And that price, we understand, feels high to the average American. But it's the best beef you can get. And his beef, if it was left up to others, would be, to me, I can't even imagine who buys it at $18 a pound. It's not us average Americans. It's not me. Probably not you. But this is his dream, and I want him to succeed. And this is the best way I know how. So I hope you enjoy and keep tuning in, spreading the word. Flying H, Black Angus beef in Downey, Idaho. Our Facebook page is Flying H Ranch Black Angus beef. We'll have a website soon, Flying H Ranch Beef, and keep you posted on what we're up to, and that you can feel good about what you're feeding your family and where it's coming from. We may not like the prices, but it could be worse if you watch this whole thing about. Anyway, said enough. Have a wonderful day. See ya.